All right, good evening, everybody. Good evening, everybody. It's 6:30 at least in in the Eastern Caribbean. I hope that everybody's feeling well. Hope everybody had a good day today. If you're back from work, hope you had a very productive day today at work. I'm gonna start marking the register very early. So those of you who are here and those of you who may come, are just getting ready to do that. All right. Um, Also, I'm checking here to make sure that everything is a-okay and that we are up and ready to go. Okay. So, welcome to our Caribbean classroom. I'm checking to see what's the latest as well over there in Iran. And a lot of things are happening. Things are going pretty fast. So I'm going to give you a quick update on that before we get into what's happening. I see there is right now there are strikes in southern Beirut. I think Israel wants to take the southern half of Beirut to expand upwards into their greater Israel plan. So that could be part of it right there. What else do we have here? Somebody says that fireballs rain over April amid heavy strikes. Heavy strikes, Iraq night sky erupts in flames amid ongoing strikes over there. Massive Israeli strikes hit Beirut suburbs tonight again. Pentagon denies F-15 loss over Kuwait. Iran fighting for humanity, they said. Visibility. Man, I telling you, you can see a lot of things are happening. Um, a US Shahid clone drone shot down by Iran. And Iran says if Trump hits Iran infrastructure, it will no longer be an eye for an eye, but eye for head, hand, and foot. America will be paralyzed. That's according to the senior IRGC member. So things are moving at lightning speed. Things are happening across there. So let me start by saying good evening to everybody who is in the classroom. Let me just check something quickly as well here for you because somebody told me that the oil prices today were a bit high. So I'm looking to see what oil prices were today. The crude futures actually went down to $18.15 per barrel today. Um, and basically, what happened is because Trump backed off of that Iranian infrastructure threat, the markets actually just went back down instead of continue climbing upwards. So this is how the market operates. It operates on the events that are taking place really. Even the Dow Jones in the US surged 600 points today because Trump said he was not going to hit the Iranian infrastructure. But I don't trust that. I don't trust the US administration. When they tell you they're not going to do something, look out for them. They're going to do it. You have to know what is that, and then the whole place will just go into chaos again. But as of now, the crude futures are $89.12. It's fluctuating all the time. And let's see what else is happening out here. So, yep, they're saying that the price of oil actually fell and to $89.12. And that's because Trump backed off of hitting Iran. So he's manipulating the market for political reasons in the US. Remember if he loses this one, that's it for all of them. And so they're manipulating the market so that they can get maximum benefit from the midterm election. But we'll see how that goes, okay? We definitely see how that goes. But they're just manipulating the market. So don't feel glad about that. Just don't feel too glad about that. They're just manipulating the market at this point in time. All right, let me get into marking the register. Let me get to mark the register at this point in time. Let me say good evening to Rashi. Let me also say good evening to Yvette Phillips. Let me say good evening to Reply 30. Um, Hops Bread is with us as well. Lindy and Hector, top of the night. Slimy is here as well. Slimy, what's happening in New York? What's going on? Debbie Bourne is with us. Debbie is checking in from New Jersey. Slimmer 51 is checking in from Jamaica. We have Gail Jarvis. She's saying good evening. We have Peter Hill checking in as well with us. Anan 000. That's right. Wilma Pat as well is already in the house. I'm looking for everybody to mark the class register at this time. Javon is in the house. Let's see who else is here with us already. Adrian Maxwell says the war paused for 5 days. LOL. You damn right about that. Justice G80. Catherine Weeks is in the house. Mikkel is in the house. Beverly is in the house. Um, that's what it is. Well, Peter, we can see that the oil prices are moving in the right direction. The oil prices are being manipulated by statements made by the President of the United States of America. If tonight he gets up and he feels to go on Truth Social and say, I am going to bomb every part of Iran tomorrow morning, by the time you get up by midnight tonight, the gas prices are back up to $115 because that's how market functions and what's happening. So can't say it's going in the right direction. We have to keep looking at it. All right. So Wayne Gibson, top of the evening. Yeah. Tony, Marshall, Toya, Marshall, Chelsea, Chelsea as well in the house as well. Everybody's checking in early this evening. Everybody's checking in early this evening. I'm marking register very early. So if you're on already, share the live with your friends. Tell them the classes is about to start so we can get going. So we have Tanika Tang is in the house. Sadiq, that's right. Top of the evening to you as well. Right. So everybody's getting into the classroom. Share the live, share it so that people will know that we're on and we could get going because I'm not going to mark register when I'm finished here. I'm not going to go back to mark the register again. The register is marked at one time in the class, and maybe at the end of the class, I'll check to see who is missing. And according to how it's going, we'll decide if you want to go back there again and, check that register. Cinnamon, good evening to you. She's all the way from St. Lucia. Chevon 91 is in the house as well. Guys, early up, I'm going to let you know that I placed a link in the comment section. In the comment section, I placed a link in the comment section, and that's for you to click and come on in and talk to me once you're in the classroom and you want to add your voice to anything, you want to make a point. That's what you are supposed to do. Click on that link, follow the instructions, and come on in. All right. So we're back in the classroom again this evening. I want to start with this weird stuff out of Cuba. Really, really weird stuff out of Cuba. I'm amazed at how people operate in this universe. Very, very, very amazed. Cuba, as you know, is under a blockade, an oil blockade. Being there really, and there's an embargo on Cuba for the last 60 years, really, 60 plus years. Right now, no oil can actually flow into Cuba. Anybody who dares bring oil into Cuba, the US government is either sanctioning that person, takes the oil, do whatever they want to do. So that's a problem right now with Cuba, and that is why Cuba is facing all these blackouts. But the audacity, right, of the US Embassy in Cuba. I don't know how many of you read that story, know about that story, but the audacity of the Cuban Embassy, the US Embassy in Cuba, telling the Cuban government or requesting of the Cuban government that they should be allowed to bring in fuel. So just imagine you're living in Cuba, you can't get fuel, you can't get any oil, but yet the US Embassy in Cuba is requesting of your government, because I'm saying that you're living in Cuba, right? They're requesting of the government in Cuba to basically have permission to bring in fuel. Now tell me how you would feel about that. Here is the United States of America punishing Cuba. Can't get in their oil, can't get the oil shipments to come in. They are blockaded every vessel. But yet, the American embassy in Cuba is requesting of the Cuban government for them or to give them permission for them to bring in fuel for their generators. Now explain something to me. Explain that to me. I want to know what is that. Somebody need to explain that to me. Really. Explain it to me. You can't get anything to you. You can't get fuel. But the same people who are oppressing you, they're telling you, are requesting of your government to give them permission to bring in fuel for themselves. I mean, talk to me. Talk to me. Hmm? Talk to me. Huh? Really talk to me. Let me say good evening to Stephen Wood. Stephen Wood is in the house. Evid Bernice is in the house as well. Royal B Justice. Francine Douglas. Charles is in the house. Yeah, so let's get to that. Let's get to that. Let's get to that. And Justice says, yes, I saw that. That outrageous. Aren't we afraid of God anymore and what He will do to people who are committing these atrocities? Hmm? And somebody else also say, adding insult to injury, adding insult to the injury. Hmm? Just imagine that. Just imagine that. You're living in a country. You're living in a country. So say, let's say you're living in Barbados and the United States place sanctions on Barbados. They can't bring in fuel, jet fuel can't come in, a lot of things just can't come in. But yet, the American embassy in Barbados is requesting of the government in Barbados to give them waivers to allow them to bring in fuel for them. But they're the same people pressuring you. It's madness, absolute madness. Hmm? Good evening to Anna, Jamaica, in the class. Well, Rashi's correct. Pure disrespect on another level. They have no empathy. Otto 718, top of the evening to you. Crazy. It's really crazy. But let's get back to that information. So that's what they're doing. So the Cuban government actually rejected from the US Embassy in Havana to import diesel for its generators as the islands grapples with a fuel shortage due to a blockade imposed by the Trump administration. I call them the Trump regime because the way they're operating like a regime. Remember, they call Maduro a regime, they call it Cuban a regime because they say they're not democratic. But right now, the way the Trump administration is behaving, they're behaving like a regime. So I call them the Trump regime. And it says, citing diplomatic cables, the Washington Post reported the embassy warned the State Department on Wednesday that the denial could force non-essential staff to leave the Caribbean island in May or possibly earlier. Well, go. Who wants you there in the first place to begin with? Leave. Leave. The Cuban people really won't miss you. And says the embassy sought permission to import 2 containers of fuel from the US, per the Post, that's according to the Post. And the ministry interprets as shameless the claim by the diplomatic mission to access a good as a privilege that it denies the Cuban people. The Cuban Foreign Ministry reported, said in its refusal. Do you understand what is happening here? The government of Cuba says it is shameless for the US Embassy in Cuba to want to import fuel while your same regime in the US that you're working for is denying us that very same need. Could you imagine that? Hmm? Could you imagine things like that? It's real madness, absolute madness. And justice says the whole thing hurts my heart. It's called entitlement. That's how they think. And let me say good evening to Sharon James from Tortola and Arthur Jackson 723 in the house as well with us. Shameless, you call that? Shameless. You're asking and requesting of the Cuban government to allow you to bring in fuel. In the meantime, you're blocking the same people in Cuba from having the same amenities that you want to have. I mean, What kind of madness is this? Huh? What kind of madness is that? And that is why I agree with what the ministry in Cuba said, the foreign ministry said. It is a shameless act for the US Embassy to request of the Cuban government to bring in fuel while they're denying the people of Cuba the same fuel. You could imagine, you have 11 million people in Cuba under starvation because of what the United States is doing. That blockade that they have. 11, I mean, the blockade was one thing and bad already for 60 plus years going on. But when you're denying them fuel to run their generators for their hospitals, for people who are elderly to run a fan in their house, I mean, you're absolutely killing people and you have no shame. And you know what is even more disappointing? Well, it's not disappointing to me because I didn't expect the leaders in the region to do anything about it. They're just as bad as the Trump regime. Up to now, I haven't even sent them. They haven't even sent a grain and a blade of grass to these people in Cuba. So they are shameless as the Trump regime. But you know what's even more disturbing? There are a lot of ordinary people in this region, ordinary people who are actually backing what the United States is doing. Do you know that? There are actually people in this region here, in this Caribbean here of ours, who's actually backing what the United States is doing. As in, I'm talking about ordinary citizens of the Caribbean, not just not just the politicians. I'm talking about ordinary day-to-day people. I've heard some people right in St. Vincent said that the Americans are right to do what they want to do with Cuba because it is time for communism to end. But they have the United States or the Trump regime came into this region right in St. Vincent waters, and a drone strike on a vessel, St. Lucians were killed. And you mean to tell me that you have Vincentians, some of them saying, yes, the right to do what they have to do. If it's drugs, it's drugs. Up to now, we don't know if it's drugs. We don't even know because the government said it got about $500 million worth of cocaine. We've never seen a photo to prove that. Yesterday in Jamaica, you saw them talking about 1.3 billion worth of cocaine, and they had evidence. They have the vessel, and they have the cocaine on its the coke on display package and stuff like that. And I'll get into a story just now for you about a UK national, a British man who was arrested here in St. Vincent. I'll try to show you some hypocrisy between the 500 million worth of cocaine. I don't know who gave them that story to peddle, and this one with this gentleman from the UK. But let's continue with what is happening here with from Barbados as well. Well, from Cuba first, and then we go on to Barbados. So this is really something that I really wanted to talk about because I find it to be really disgusting. Really disgusting. Um, I tell you something. A lot of things are happening, and because of the because of what is happening in Barbados, there's something that took place, and I'll get to that in a short while for you. But let us continue with this Cuba issue. Right, so the US embassy sought permission to import 2 containers of fuel from the US. Could you imagine that? 2 containers of fuel, while the people in Cuba can't even get a liter of fuel. Huh? Not even half gallon of fuel they could get. Just imagine that. Anyway, Cuba, which is heavily dependent on Venezuela oil, has not received any shipments in the past 3 months as a result of sustained US embargo put in place in January, following what you call there the military operation in Venezuela, where they kidnapped the president of Venezuela. So let's get back to the chat section, see what the folks are saying. It says, "Is Cuba a member of CARICOM?" No, Cuba is not a member of CARICOM. They are part of the region, and so they have helped CARICOM countries in the past with whether it's education, whether it be studying there in Cuba, where they get scholarships paid for by the Cuban government. They also have doctors and nurses that came to the aid of Caribbean people when the pandemic was on and hospitals were running low on nurses, when a lot of them were fired because they did not want to take a vaccine. And that's something I have to get back into one of these days. Cuba came to their aid, and now we are banishing Cuba into the wind. All right, so Mr. Rima is inside there with us as well. Let's see. Justice says no shame, and on top of that, fellow Caribbean islands are turning their backs on Cuba. That's ungratefulness. Ungratefulness is worse than witchcraft. And then Peter Hill says go back to coal power plants quick. And somebody else said this is really a humanitarian situation now. They're just like Trump. And then they said, but they have filed diplomatic ties with CARICOM. Yes, all of the countries in CARICOM, really, most of them, I would say all of them have diplomatic ties with Cuba. So that is where it is. After what Cuba has done for the Caribbean, I am so ashamed. Many need to repair their ignorance at an alarming rate. I agree with that. Also, they are going to start drone strikes in New York for suspected drug dealers. All right. Well, that will be that is great. Start there. That's where you need to start because that's where the drugs is in America. And if there are suppliers outside, there must be buyers somewhere. So I think that you would have started with your buyers before you came to the suppliers. Because once you get rid of the buyers, the suppliers will have to go elsewhere. If you leave the suppliers in place, well, then you know what is going to take place. Virgil is in class. Top of the evening to you. Black Rose says good evening. And also, Mia says hi. I cannot see how Cuba never jumped on the solar program. Cuba has 20% solar. Well, yeah, Cuba is making some serious strides in solar right now. Absolute big thing in solar right now. But not everybody would be able to afford the solar. But that's why I was saying that these countries in the region need to move to you need to invest more in the solar energy. I mean, if you have farms and because of you live in a hurricane belt, if something come around, you will get some problems. But if you have the bank, you can store the energy, store it, and just keep on storing. A lot of countries have been doing big solar farms. They can harvest megawatts of power. So I don't know what we're doing in the region. I mean, it's just something that we have to talk about really one of these days. All right. So this is the issue with Cuba, and Cuba has denied these shameless people from the Trump regime any way how to bring in fuel into that country while there are people having nationwide blackouts and all that kind of stuff inside of Cuba. It's just absolutely shameless, very very shameless what these people do um, to the Cuban people as well. Very very shameless, very very shameless. Listen, I think Sharon wants to join the class, so let's see if we could bring in Sharon. Sharon Lewis, good evening. All right, Sharon, you have to give your microphone audio. If you don't give audio to your microphone, we are not be able to hear you. You must give audio to your microphone. Okay? And I'll stand by and I'll wait for you when you come back in. So you have to go out and come back in and we can have a conversation. All right, Sharon? All right. Top of the evening to you as well. But you have to give permission to your microphone. Guys, I want to show you something here that's happening um, in Barbados. This is absolute craziness going on in Barbados. I don't know. Those of you living in Barbados would be able to tell me how the crime situation is going. But we have an MP who's actually calling for hanging to come back. I'm not sure how you feel about the hanging thing, but I know in countries in the East where drugs are part of. Okay, let me see if I could get back Sharon to come in. All right, let's add Sharon back. Yes, Sharon, good evening.
Hi. Okay. I was just wondering, are you
Mhm.
hearing me okay?
We got you loud and clear now. Got you loud and clear.
Good. So I know there's Guantanamo Bay that
Mm-hmm.
the US rents from Cuba. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm just learning. So, I was just saying, couldn't they just drive down there and get some fuel? I also just learned that the rent
Mm-hmm.
for Gitmo is 2,000 gold coins.
Mm-hmm.
Hold on. 2,000 gold coins.
Um, okay, I think we probably lost. I think we probably lost Sharon. Sharon, are you still there? Um, hmm. Wow. Uh, wow. I think we lost Sharon. We think we lost. I think we lost Sharon. Um, Sharon. Okay. All right. I think we lost Sharon. So you can get back in. All right. So let's see if we can get back in. Whenever you're ready, you can come back in. Yeah. I think we lost Sharon. So you'll have to come back in. Okay. So the issue with Cuba now. The issue with Cuba. Guantanamo Bay is actually or technically owned by Cuba. I'm trying to see if I could get something here to put up on the screen to show you, what it looks like from the air. Let's see if we could get. This is it's part of the naval station, of course. To keep people there. So I'm try to get something up on the screen to show you. This time, I can show you what it looks like for those of you who probably don't pay much attention to Cuba. But here it is. This is what it looks like, basically from the air. This is an aerial shot. This is really an aerial shot of Guantanamo Bay. It's not the whole thing really, but it's just an idea so that you could know how it looks. All right. So this place is really technically owned by Cuba, but is under the permanent de facto control of the United States. They operated a naval base there since 1903, and the U.S. maintains authority really over the 45 square mile area through what they call a perpetual lease agreement, while Cuba retains ultimate sovereignty over the territory. So this happened in 1903, and the US maintains authority over the 45 square mile area through what they call a perpetual lease agreement. And perpetual means till the end of time. But Cuba retains ultimate sovereignty over the territory. The lease established the base through an agreement following the Spanish American Wars. And then you had the legal status where the United States considered the lease valid unless both parties agree to terminate it. The Cuban position is that since the 1959 revolution, you might have remember, the Cuban government had declared the U.S. presence illegal and has refused to cash the annual rent check for over 65 years. So what is happening here is that the Cuban position since 1959, since the revolution, the Cuban government has declared that the U.S. presence is illegal, and they have refused to cash the annual rent checks for over 65 years. So that agreement, of course, 1934, you had a treaty of relations which is currently in force, which authorizes the U.S. to operate the base unless it abandons it or both governments agree to terminate the lease. And this is happening although the Cuban government disputes the validity of that agreement, and the United States has continued to maintain the base as a key military installation in the Caribbean. So they are on Cuba, but that agreement is actually that agreement actually is in dispute right now. Cuba has done that for a long time. Good evening. Good evening.
Yes, good evening, Mr. Cook.
How are you
Good
doing? How are
evening
you
to
doing?
all on the chat who listening on the live. Are you getting any feedback there?
No, go right ahead. Go right ahead. We're hearing you loud and clear.
Okay. Well, I'm listening to you for the longest while with the problems Cuba having. Okay. And I listen. I've been studying the Cubans and the regime and all the geopolitics for a long time, all the struggles with Cuban people.
Yeah.
Now, you might not agree with me on certain things I'm going to mention. Things they go wrong with Cuba. You might not agree. I see you don't touch them areas. If you was living in Cuba and you're not allowed to have a business, for example, a laundromat or a hairdressing or a barber saloon, how would you feel as a citizen? Even if you open that business, they have two currencies where you use the lower currency, right? For your clients to pay you whenever they get their hair cut or they come to your laundromat. And no matter how hard you work, you're not getting anything because they pay you with the lower, you use the lower currency in your business and they have to pay you the lower currency. You know anything about that?
Well, there have been that issue
They
going
even
on.
use US dollars.
Yeah, well, you can't. Well, you can't use US dollars. There's an embargo. There's a sanction on you since 1960, so you can't use US dollars.
No, well, whenever tourists come in the
okay.
country, they will get US dollars and change it,
Yeah.
or they could the tourists would change it or pay for something.
Right.
You understand? So
Well, Cuba has
that
been-
come like a third currency.
Cuba. You see, Cuba is a very complex situation. Cuba, and I'm telling you.
But I asking you a question too. No, let me don't skip. I asking you a question. How would you feel as a citizen in that country with a situation like that?
If I'm living in a country where I can't own a business or I can't do certain things, of course I would not feel good. That's number one. I would not feel
And
good.
you would want to come out.
And if I'm
or
there,
you would want change.
And if I think that I have to come out to get where I'm going, I will come out.
Right.
But
so you see, you wouldn't like
it. When we speak of that.
But you answer me there.
No,
let
but
me talk.
When we speak of
so
that,
the question.
when we speak of that.
Next question.
No, you can't come and say, listen to me, we're having a class, so this is how we do classes. We exchange ideas. So you ask me a question, I've answered the question, but the question cannot be answered in a vacuum. So you have to go now and say, have there been any changes in Cuba as pertaining to locals owning business?
Nah, I ask you a question. We want to go there.
Yes, we have to go there because if we are having a proper,
know that the ease up on these things, the ease up.
Go ahead. You go ahead.
No, don't jam me so.
No. I'm saying if we are having a class, we have to have proper discussion.
Not taking time. You tell me you would leave, and I say to change it. Have who will want changes? They would like the government to change their policy.
Just like if you live in Trinidad and you have a problem and you want to go to America.
I realize too that you don't know that because I never hear talk about it, so I will feel that you don't know the Cuban government own everything in Cuba. They have hairdressing saloons and barber shops, bakery, laundromat. Every little thing you could think about. No, I'm talking. I want the other children in the classroom to listen to what I have to say. So businesses like this, even a bakery, the Cuban government own that. So they have people, citizens working for them, and they get a salary. People prefer to work, most of them prefer to work for the government who own these businesses because if nothing sells, they have a sure little salary to collect. But as a person doing a business like a small bakery or a hairdressing salon, they have to fish around to get a dollar, their monies. Right? Where in this region, a government own everything, right back to a hairdressing salon, barber shop, where it's no freedom there, and I don't like that. But I don't like the idea how the U.S. government have the citizens starving, because these people go through all kind of oppression from their government there, right? And I say if they have to get rid of the government, whatever, do that. But don't starve the people, because these people go through a lot. It have a lot I could talk, about Cuba. Plenty, and I could really educate the other students in the class, but I draw that reference.
Okay.
Right?
All right.
I do not like what the U.S. government is doing, Trump, right, to the citizens.
Okay.
The Cubans need to be free. I advocate all here in Trinidad. years before you even talking. It have people know me talking. I mention things like this. When Cuban people get a little remittance from the family from the United States, Western Union, or whichever money transfer, the government takes a great percentage of that money for themselves.
Yes.
And then the citizens know that they're right. And these kind of oppressions, I cannot stand and see these people suffer.
Okay.
It's time they get free. And that is what I have to say. Have a good evening.
Appreciate as always. Appreciate the call as always. Well, Miss Arima said a lot of stuff right there. And yeah, somebody said the caller's volume was louder than mine. Well, yeah, we're having some, maybe because of the way we set up the system there, but I hope that you hear me properly now. Miss Arima said a lot of things. There are, under communism, socialism, a lot of things. Governments do own a lot of infrastructure. If you go in Barbados, the way their hotel industry started was owned by governments. Before they allowed private sector to take over, they had to push the engine. In St. Vincent, government owned hotels. They started the Holiday Inn. Listen, you things with what is happening in different countries because of how they lay out their systems are always going to have problems. So to say that the Cuban people are in total dire straits, I wouldn't agree with that. And half of their problems, and I would say 85% of their problems, came from that US embargo that they pushed on Cuba. Because of that embargo, and almost every country in the world you go where you have a deep US embargo running for many years, and Cuba has been the longest one. Governments had to take over a lot of things. They had to take over oil industries. They had to take over a lot of businesses to keep them floating so that the general population can actually benefit. So while we do understand all of this, and people can travel from Cuba, they can go out, they can come back. There are doctors who come to St. Vincent. There are people who actually just come from Cuba for holidays and they go back to Cuba. There's a lot of things that people are saying about Cuba over the years. They can't move out, they can't go here, they can't go there. All those things are just a bunch of hullabaloo generated by the United States government, right? So I don't deal with Western propaganda a lot. And I'll tell you something. Cubans are allowed to own private businesses. Cubans are allowed to own private businesses. And that was made clear when they had the constitutional changes in 2019. And they formally recognized private property ownership. Before that, you had issues going on with that. But since 2019, they have been allowed to have private businesses. Of course, you heard in March of this year that the Cuban government is now allowing both residents in a new policy shift, living abroad as well, to own and invest in private companies on the island. Because, of course, you can see what's happening. And if they're saying that the people are pushing for change, they're acquiescing to that change. But private ownership have been mandated since 2019 when they made constitutional changes. So resident ownership, that came through the Constitution in 2019. So there are a lot of things that we're not hearing about Cuba that Cuba has done and is doing. Now, you have a lot of Cuban barbershops. And Ms. Arima is correct. Previously state-run, I said. She is correct with that. But they were turned over to employees in 2010. I visited that country on more than one occasion. I can tell you I probably went to Cuba 3 or 4 times. I've learned a lot of stuff about Cuba. I learned how people live, what are their fears, what they want. So I know a lot about Cuba. But some of these things becomes very minute. They become very minute in the scheme of things, in the grand scheme of things, when you look at what the United States is doing to Cuba for the last 60 years. All these things become very minute. I would dare say that there are some people in Cuba happier than those living in the United States of America. Because we claim that America have what? Democracy? Well, that's a farce. You have a government in the United States right now behaving nothing like democracy. It's being like an authoritarian. And I have always said that I believe that everybody should be able to claim their own destiny, have a right to live how they want to live, travel, do this, do that. But what is happening to the Cuban people? These things that Mr. Rima spoke about, absolutely true. But they pale in comparison to that embargo, what that embargo has done to that Caribbean island. And that is what we are speaking about in this context. But most of these Cuban barbershops, yes, was state run. They were turned over to employees in 2010. Nobody knows about that. Nobody talks about that. That was reported in the Guardian newspaper, reported in the BBC. When I went there, I learned that it was reported by the New York Times. A whole heap of them. Big newspapers in the world reported that. But we don't hear that. We don't hear that. What we hear from the Western media and the propagandists in the Western media over in the United States of America is that everything is owned by the Cuban government. So all of these things have been happening. Okay? And that shift, you had hundreds of barbershops moving over to citizens. They began their salons, their own barbershop. Just move in 2010. But you don't hear that. You don't hear that. And that is why you see people in the region, a lot of people in this Caribbean region of ours, they would say a lot of things to you. And this is not Mr. Rima I'm talking about here. I'm talking about those who speak about a lot of things that you see propaganda coming out of the US media. But while the Cuban government, I would say, historically owned almost everything, and it still controls a vast majority of the economy, it does not own everything. So following the constitutional changes you had in 2019, there are a lot of economic changes that took place in terms of, I said, private property, private business, ownership, legal, all those things are regulated. But large-scale economy, the state basically retains a monopoly on large-scale businesses like utilities and the healthcare. Just like in these countries in the region. In St. Vincent, there's a government-owned utility company, which is the electricity company. The government owns it. It's a monopoly. It's one. They own it. So we can't talk about these things in a vacuum as if Cuba is a place where the government owns everything. Because in our own island in St. Vincent, the government owns the electricity company, the utility company. They own the schools. There are some private schools in St. Vincent, but the majority of schools in St. Vincent are owned by the government of St. Vincent and the Grenadines. So that is why I was trying to tell Mr. Rima, we can't talk about these things in a vacuum. We have to look at them broad. Employment. As of 2023, the public sector still employs roughly around 65% of the workforce. And that's down from 90%. So it's private sector. People have gone to the private sector. So it's down from 90% government owned. As in the workforce, it's 65%. In St. Vincent, government is basically the largest employer. So here we go again. So that's why I was saying you can't talk about these things in a vacuum. We have to look at them from a general perspective. But on the issue, she brought up some very important points. And I am happy that she brought them up. But our main concern in this area here right now is to talk about this whole issue of what the United States is doing to Cuba. And it's about time that they stop that foolishness. Sharon, good evening.
Hi. Okay. So I started out by talking about the
Mm-hmm.
USA being tenants
Yes.
for that little piece of real estate down there in Guantanamo Bay. And
Yes.
I'll defer to both you and Miss Arima. I've never been to Cuba. But
Okay.
while you were just talking a while ago,
Mm-hmm.
something came to mind. And here you remember that Calypso song about the foreign press?
I don't.
Something like, it would tell you, the wonderful things that are happening in the various islands, but there's nothing about that in the foreign press, which has to do with the propaganda, and making things appear worse than they seem.
Yep. Yep.
No, yeah, so for a communist country, and sometimes, I just kind of just yawn in a bored way when people begin to push the
Mm-hmm.
whole communist and socialism thing, which socialism and communism are not exactly the same thing, right? So they
Absolutely.
use, right, so it is used as a lighter, then, so to speak, to light fires, and people get all up on their moral high ground and they begin to grumble about everything. But one thing I noticed when I did go look up what
Mm-hmm.
was going on with Guantanamo Bay when you
Yes.
mentioned that they needed fuel. Because I'm saying if there are tenants down there, certainly the naval base must have a little spare fuel that they
Mm-hmm.
can, lend them a little to do whatever they want to do, which is quite terrible considering what they're doing to the entire country.
Yes.
And
Yes.
I discovered that the rental for Guantanamo Bay is like 4,059 US per annum, or
Mm-hmm.
2,000 gold coins.
Yes.
And
Yes.
what is curious is that Cuba has not cashed any of those since 1959. So
That's
that
crazy.
tells that
That's
tells
crazy.
me something about the country,
Mm-hmm.
and that is chicken feed, so to
Yeah.
speak.
Yeah.
You know, so it just tells me that the people know their worth, and
Absolutely.
yes, they know their worth, and they know themselves, so this little chicken feed that you have down there is kind of like you know
Yep.
so yes. So that told me a lot,
Yes.
and how communism is supposed to be this terrible thing. So wouldn't they be down there grabbing that $4,059, and pocketing it and doing whatever they want to do? And I'm not discounting what Miss Arima has to say,
No, she
or
made some. She
you.
made some very
Yeah,
good
she
points,
made some
and,
good points,
and those
and
things,
and
those
and
things.
you being there, on you have seen
Yes.
it
Yeah, those things that
firsthand,
she spoke
right?
about. Those things that she spoke about.
Right.
There's nothing wrong with those things that she.
No, no, and
But
it's the same thing
but
here. The
but my
government in Jamaica has owned things as well, you know.
but most of the Caribbean islands, government
Yeah.
own a lot of the institutions that we see around. Most a
Mm.
lot. Like I said, very right here in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, the sole electricity company, Vinlec, it's owned by the government. It's a monopoly. There's no other electricity company here. That's owned by the government, right? The schools in these islands, there are some private schools, one, two, three, four, five of them. But they're about, I think it's about 40 something, 50 something schools outside of that owned by the government. So that's why I was telling Miss Arima, when you hear people talk about the Cuban government own everything, you cannot speak about it in a vacuum.
Right.
Because in these
Hmm.
islands, the government own a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
And they have to for a lot of reasons, because they're not big economies. That's the first thing to begin with.
There you go.
And they have to start the push. Look, there's a hotel built in St. Vincent called the Holiday Inn. You know who built the hotel? Government. Government is not
Mm.
supposed to get into the business of building hotels, but the government built it. Then say, look, if we have to move the tourism product along, a lot of private people are not getting into the business quick enough, and we have to
Mhm.
push the country's tourism because we open an airport. So they went ahead, built an airport, and now they're opening that now to private people to manage it, and that's why they got Holiday Inn to come in and say, okay, well, we could go to a lease agreement and take it over as a Holiday Inn brand and run it. But the government is the one who built it and still have the majority shares in it.
Yeah. I
So
just
we
thought
can't.
those
So,
things
so so
happen.
right. So that's why I
Right.
was saying. That's why I was saying we cannot speak of
Hmm.
things like these in a vacuum.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Go ahead.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
All right. Well, thanks for all you do. I'm
Yeah,
one of your biggest fans.
I appreciate that.
Yeah, I share. Because
Yeah,
thank you so much. Thank you
yes,
so much.
I appreciate
Yeah.
that. Appreciate
Okay.
that.
Bye.
I think we
Hmm.
have another caller with us as well. I think Slimy is on the line with us, so Slimy, we can bring in Slimy now. Slimy, top of the
Hey,
evening to you,
Ernesto, what's up?
man. I'm good. Talk to me, man. Talk to
All
me.
right.
The class is
Cuba,
hot this
Cuba
evening.
before the revolution was a horror show. It was
Yes.
bankrolled by the mafia, the
Mm-hmm.
U.S. intelligence, and wealthy U.S. businessmen.
That's right.
The American mafia in Cuba, led by Maya Langsky,
Correct.
Lucky Luciano,
Mm,
Santo Traficante Jr., paid the then Cuban dictator Batista
that's
to
right.
kill, torture, and intimidate any suspected Cuban dissenter, with the
Correct.
goal of keeping Havana safe and quiet so that their empire of drug trafficking,
Mm-hmm.
human trafficking, and gambling could continue unabated. The
Man, are they
belief
really?
that the
Are
belief
they
that
really? Go ahead.
pre-revolution Cuba was anything but a deadly despotic hellhole run
Yep.
by gangsters is a cute story, but nowhere
Mhm.
is based in reality. Make no mistake, when the capitalists say they want to free Cuba from the revolutionary government,
Yep.
this is what they have in mind.
Yeah.
So I have a question for Mr. Remo. What is the problem with a
Hmm.
government that is actually serving its people? You can't compare Cuba with which has like a different economic system than
That's
the
what it is.
capitalists. You can't compare the two. So Mr. Rima is looking at Cuba from a capitalist perspective, where
That's right.
she's thinking, oh, I can't run my business, so I can't get rich and all that stuff. But in Cuba, it's all communism, where everyone rises together. The
Mm-hmm.
government owns the business and dictates policy and where the entire country goes. So
Correct.
you might go and get a haircut for like 5 cents.
That's right.
So what is like Miss Rima needs to educate herself,
But look,
know and understand what the Cuban people went through before the revolution, why they even had the revolution. And another thing, Cuba has a breakthrough treatment for Alzheimer's right now.
correct.
They also did some cancer cures a few years back. How much money, if Cuba was allowed to bring those treatments to the international market, Cuba would be flowing with money. But they are not allowed to do that because of the United States government. And if they were allowed to come into the international market and thrive,
Hmm.
the people in the United States would be looking at Cuba and looking at their standard of living and seeing how the government, a communist government like a few miles away from Florida, is
Yep.
actually taking care and serving the needs of their people, compared to a capitalist where only the rich get richer. So Mr. Rima, I encourage you to do some education and really study up on communism. We've been painted this horrible, evil, nasty picture that
Yeah, I
communists are
know.
these
I
horrible
try.
people, but they're not.
I try to.
Communism is just simply a community of people coming together, setting policy, and rising together
Correct.
as a
Correct.
whole. And
I
and
try
that
to
is
stay.
what
I
actually
try to
we
stay
need.
away from the. I try to stay away
And
from the.
socialism is different from communism, only that the communists are more hardcore. Socialism is like communism light,
Correct.
basically.
Correct.
So that
I
that's my
think.
contribution.
Simon, we've been all schooled when we were younger in the Western society,
Yeah.
right? And we've heard a lot of things. We were told the worst of the worst, and like you and myself, we decided no, there has to be more than what they're saying. So we decided to venture out into different, studies. So that's how we would understand these things. But I appreciate Miss Arima though. She brought some good points out. I don't have an issue with Miss Arima whatsoever. I
But
think she
she
brought.
was talking about these points from a point of ignorance. So what if the government owns a
I
barber shop?
wouldn't. I wouldn't say ignorance per se. I wouldn't call it
Well,
ignorance.
ignorance because she's not studying up what communism is. She's
Okay.
still with the brainwashing that communism is bad and the communists are bad and they're evil.
No, I think what Mr. Rima was saying is that what we basically do when we hear people talk generally about Cuba, We are talking about it from the standpoint of what the United States of America is doing to Cuba. She said she doesn't hear any other things about Cuba, and I think that was the standpoint she was coming from. But so I really wouldn't go down that road with her. I appreciate all of the points that she do make anyway. But Slimy, appreciate
Nice talking to you,
your
brother.
you know, yeah, appreciate your points of view and coming in and talking to us
All
this
right.
evening. Thanks a lot, man. Appreciate it. I think I have Miss Arima back on the line. Miss Arima, go right ahead.
Yes. Hello once again.
Yes, go right ahead. Go right ahead.
Slimy and I really don't get along, you know. We
Oh
get
Lord.
along to a point.
Well,
I said, I ask you a question, you give me answer. And then you want to say that in St. Vincent and other countries, the governments own schools, they own the electricity company, etc., etc. Those are large companies. I am speaking about small business people, hairdressers, right? People who could have a laundromat. Here in Trinidad, the government have schools. Then it have the private schools. It have government assisting schools like the Roman Catholic schools, the Anglican, right? And many years ago, we used to have private secondary schools. It have a few still, right?
mm-hmm.
Which Cuban in a country with embargo could own an electricity company, a businessman? Which Cuban in embargo could own a school? Come on, I wasn't talking about that. I talk about small businesses, even running a little kitchen. They tax these people like that. Why? Because of the embargo, yes. And why they had to make some changes to allow certain citizens, according to what business, small business you're doing, just a few years ago. It's over 60 years they're in embargo. So they had to get punished. The government had to get punished in order to make these changes now, because Cubans are protesting. Slimy cannot speak a word in Spanish. I am fluent in Spanish. I look at the news from all sides. It's years I studying about these, looking at these Cubans.
Listen. I hear your points. I agree with your points, but I'm not going to go back and forth on it. The program.
When I dealing with Slimy, he calling
but I don't want
that
kind of thing in the classroom.
No,
I don't
so
want that.
Slimy can't say.
No. I don't want that kind of Miss Arima, I am not going to allow that kind of back and forth with people getting into one another's throat over something. I think I already corrected Slimy. I said you were speaking about small businesses and you wanted to bring it, so I'm going to leave it like that. I want our class to remain polite to each other. We don't want the back and forth and the argument starting over nonsense. We're speaking of the issue of what the Americans are doing to the Cubans right now. That is what the program is about tonight. So let's leave it at that. Okay?
Okay then.
Thank you very much.
Again, I say I too don't like what the U.S. is doing to the citizens of Cuba.
All right.
End of story.
All right. Thank you very much. All right, good. And I will say again that when we speak of things, we cannot speak of them in a vacuum. We can't do that. But let's continue the class anyway. Like me says, Cubans are generally happy. Blah blah blah. Let's see what else is in the classroom. China is a communist and people have businesses. That's Mr. Rima saying that. No, Mr. Rima, somebody else said what US is doing to Cuban people is not right. The people are suffering. The people have a right to live. Cuba almost has a cure for Alzheimer's. Everyone wants to live and call American dream. There's nothing called any American dream. That's a fast. Let's get over that. Cuban system is more like China, but look at China's growth without U.S. embargo. Yeah, that's basically what it is. That's basically what it is. If they did not have that embargo, things would have been totally different. Totally different. All right, so we are moving on. We are moving on to another topic this evening. Yeah, we're moving on. We're moving on here. Let's see what else somebody else is saying. And guys, if you need to come in on the program, you can actually click on the link that's in the comment section, and you can come on in like how Slimy came in and like how Sharon came in to speak with us. You can come on in and do that as well. I want to get on to the issue of Barbados. There is something happening in Barbados that is very, very interesting. Very, very interesting. By the way, the Cuban government said that they are actually preparing for any eventuality that there is an attack on their country. So that's something that we have to keep our eyes on for a while. All right, and I am here to ensure that we speak about this. And maybe I should have set some rules. I don't want anybody quarreling on the program, back and forth with each other, having some kind of argument over anything. If people make their points, they move on, we continue. I don't want that kind of back and forth and people getting at one another's throat on this classroom. That's not what I'm here for. I'm not on that. I want to make that point very, very clear, and I should have made it from the beginning. All right? That's what we are here. We are here to learn. People make their points, they move on. That's it. I'm not here for any back and forth. We already have the Edomites putting us against ourselves. And when I say Edomites, I'm talking about these white people already putting us against ourselves since we were young and going to school, teaching us a lot of garbage and nonsense. And I don't want us to get down the road of eating down one another's throat. Okay? That's what it is. In Barbados, and I'm not sure if you recognize that the crime situation is getting out of hand. And because it is getting out of hand, an MP in Barbados is calling for hanging to return, basically. I know most of these Caribbean islands would have signed agreements. I can't even remember what it was back in the day. There was this Pratt and Morgan case where they basically got to abolish the hanging. Well, most of them have it on the books, but they don't use it anymore because of the ruling in that Pratt and Morgan case. But they're saying here today that hours after mass shooting in the remote north of the island claimed 13th murder for the year, government-backed MP on Monday issued a stark appeal to let the gallows swing again after the latest slaying occurred in his constituency. So they're saying that St. Lucie MP Peter Phillips told the newspapers today in Barbados that he was concerned about the rise in gun crime and suggested that the justice system revisit the death penalty to crack down on lawless slayings. Phillips described the killing of a deeply personal. Phillips described the killing as deeply personal, noting he had a close relationship with the Archer family for a long time. Police said the bullets were sprayed from a dark-colored vehicle as it drove past a bar in Checker Hall around 10:50 p.m. on Sunday, hitting several people at a karaoke line, including a 31-year-old who was rushed to the Sandy Crest Medical Center where he later died, while 9 others were taken to the Queen Elizabeth Hospital for treatment of their wounds. And he says, I support capital punishment. I said this without any kind of hesitation. I believe we have to begin to hang a couple of people for doing these foolish things. The question here is, do you think that this hanging will actually solve any of the problems that we've been having in these Caribbean countries? Um, Even in St. Vincent at one time, the former prime minister, people were calling for him to bring back the hangman when we start having a lot of murders on the island. So the question is, anybody from Barbados, I'm not sure if you are here in the classroom. I think there are a good bit of people from Barbados in the classroom. If you could come in, let me get your take on what's happening in Barbados and what do you think or not the crime situation could be solved if we actually bring back the hangman. A lot of people are saying it can't do anything because of the generation that we have today. Some people are saying it would work because basically it's a small society. And if you proper neck analyze somebody, they're saying that, look, people will just get scared. They will think twice about committing crime. So let's see what's happening, because I know in some of the countries in the Far East, there's hanging. There's hanging. And because of that, their crime rates are almost like down to zero. So I don't know what is it that you're saying. Um, so I don't know if you're saying that maybe they should bring back the hanging. Maybe it could help. Look, we have a lot of laws on the books. We have a lot of laws on the books, and UN could say what they want to say. The inter-American this can say what they want to say. The laws in this and in St. Vincent, as I say it, is that you have to wait the 5 years. You have to do the 5 years. You do the you go up to the case. You go for the case. You make the appeal. You go to the Privy Council. You do all of that, and if you come back and listen to me, I remember in Trinidad with dual trading when that government decided to just hang a bunch of people. You see what happened to the crime rate? It plunged for a while. And that's because nobody really wants their neck prop, no matter how bad they are. When you think about that, they just but I know that these islands, if they want to get up a morning and hang somebody after the 5 year have expired, they can do it. I've spoken to prime ministers in this region, they said they can do it. It's just that a lot of them are afraid of the backlash from the Human Rights Association, from the international arena, and maybe from some of their own people who will say, why you did that, even though blah, 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 blah. But my point about it is that I think there's a case to be made for the hanging. If the United States of America, let me ask you a question. The United States of America have electric chair. Is that worse than hanging? Now, let us talk about this thing because you see a lot of people in the Caribbean like to talk about, international this quote and UN this. And let me tell you all something. The Americans have death by lethal injection. You know how disastrous that is? Hmm? There was a botch one happened years ago. The person said, watch, they would not want the worst enemy to feel that. There was a botch one, the person didn't die. Lethal injection. Is that worse than hanging? The electric chair. Talk to me about that. I hear people talking about you can't hang on it. You see me, let me tell you something. We take these things because the Americans tell us we can't do them. And the British tell us we can't do them. But in their country, they have electric chair and they have lethal injection and they have all sorts of things. I am thinking if you were to bring an electric chair in the Caribbean and say you're going to do it, I'm sure that the same Americans would tell you can't do it. But they have it up there. Why do they still have it? Why? Why is it that we always about this interconnected and this quote and that quote? Why? Why? Talk to me about that. Talk to me about that. Talk to me about that. I don't want people telling me about. I don't want people telling me about these all these foolishness about this. Now tell me about that. Tell me about the lethal injection used in the United States of America. Okay, so well, since we can't do the hanging, what about the electric chair in these islands? You agree to the electric chair? No, well, that is very inhumane, but the United States do it and nobody don't cry out. Me don't hear Caribbean people crying out to that. Take all your head out of America. Take it out of America. Take it out of the bottom. I'm not speaking to a lot of you here because most of you here on this live really appreciate the wisdom and the understanding that we don't bow to these Western media propaganda anymore. I'm just saying, these people do things that if you do them, they will want to chastise you. You understand what I'm saying? That's all I'm saying. Anyway, well, a referendum would be good to have, and if a referendum says that we should do it, let's get it and go. Let's get it and go. Sometimes I wonder, I often say that the law is an ass. And I'll tell you why I say the law is an ass. The law has to be an ass, and I'll tell you why the law is an ass. Years ago in St. Vincent, right? A young lady went to the bus terminal. A man came there and unalived her. Off with her head, walking around with it in the bus terminal. Police was there. People who had guns were there. I'm talking about licensed firearms. And this man keep walking around with the woman's head and the body on one side jumping. Now, talk to me about that. He is in Jail sitting down after committing such a crime. Jail sitting down eating taxpayers' money and telling the government that he has a special diet because he's a Muslim. Now talk to me about that. Up to now, he hasn't seen the gallows. What is worst of the worst? Cut off the neck. Walk around with it, parade with it. Police said the only reason why they shoot it because the man had a gun. The man had a cutlass in his hand. A cutlass in his hand. I'm a police with a gun, and he has a cutlass in his hand, and he ain't dead yet. They'll have to throw me out of the police force because I would have taken him out. They'll have to throw me out of the police force if they thought that I killed him for no reason. Well, they would have say I shouldn't have done that. But I would say I would have taken him out and take the jail. That is the mindset. You can't tell me. You can't tell me that somebody does that. Then you had another one. Went into a man farm. Met the man farming, an old man. Met the man farming. This is what the man do for a living. Huh? Take the man, Walk into the man farm. Take the man. Off with his head. I'm talking about his sentiments, Cut out his intestines. Cut out his belly. Take off foot. The police found foot one place. They found intestines. Everything else buried another place. The man's head was in another direction buried. Do you know that when they went to the UK, the Privy Council, because they wanted the death penalty for the man? Do you know what the Privy Council told the lawyers who came up there? That is not the worst of the worst. He's not deserving of the death penalty. Imagine some white people sit down in a court in England, miles away from you, tell you in your little island where you never see that before, that is not the worst of the worst. Take him back to jail, feed him until he dies. You could imagine that? If I were the government, the mindset I have, when I come back from England, he was on the gallows the next day. Who vex? Bade. I don't understand it. I don't understand it. Well, if they're Jasmine Clark, if they're possessed with the devil and the demons, well, the demons will have to walk with them. Huh? Well, somebody said that is why Trump had to do what he has to do. Well, Trump is a different case altogether. He's a different case altogether. There's something absolutely wrong with him in a different fashion. That's a different thing altogether. There's something wrong with him, and we'll have to discuss him at night. That's a different thing. You could imagine that? Is it not the worst of the worst? Take him back, feed him. Making joke. Human Rights Association, out they could tell me how to run my little country. Man been going on the gallows. They could have barred from now till the cows come home. That ain't gonna change. Once he neck down prop. That ain't a discussion. They can't bring him back. That ain't a discussion. Don't want to hear anything. Human rights, my foot. You get one term in office, so be it. But he will have to know what it is. Torah says, an eye for an eye. That's what the Torah says. I believe in the Torah. I shall have business. So that is what it is. That is what it is. That is what it is. And that's another topic that we'll have to talk about on another night. You must remind me. Message me and remind me, because that's another topic we'll have to discuss another night. I want to go this year. Now, sometimes I try to wonder, what is it that these Caribbean government and who really writes the script for these Caribbean people? But you know what? I think I'll have to leave this for another night. Tomorrow night, we'll have to bring this guy back. I don't want to talk about this here tonight. This is a long, long one. I think this is a program by itself. So we'll have to talk about that tomorrow night. All right? That is tomorrow night. Yeah, we'll have to talk about that tomorrow night. Yeah. But Mr. Rima, you're very correct. They need funding from United Nations, so they bow to whatever the empire says. But we talk about this guy here tomorrow night. I have to close it off at this time. We'll have to close it off now. So we talk about this
tomorrow night. Most High willing, yes. So we'll talk about that tomorrow night. All right. How can you override if a nation full of people say by vote tally they want to be governed by death penalty? No, you can override that. Let me tell you something. Let me tell you what happened. The government, the governments that we have in the region, I call them town councils, governors, and mayors operating plantations for their landlords. That is what is happening. And we'll talk about that on our next night as well. So, guys, take it easy. Take care. We'll talk tomorrow night. The Most High give us life, breath, strength. We'll talk about that tomorrow night. We'll bring up this guy, that guy on the screen. Remember to hit the like button, subscribe, share this live, do all of that. Thanks to everybody who was on the live tonight. Really appreciate you coming on and sticking around. Um, this guy on the screen is a British national arrested in St. Vincent with cocaine. Lots of cocaine, they say, lots of cocaine. We talk about that tomorrow night. I'll tell you why I want to bring that up. Tomorrow night. So we talk about that. Take it easy, take care. Remember to like, subscribe, follow the backup channel, subscribe to the backup channel, which is Caribbean Classroom. Make sure you follow that just in case the little devils of YT decide to take us off this one again. So just in case we have the backup. But you make sure you subscribe to the backup as well. And share this video with your friends and all of that. And we'll talk another night again. Have a good night, guys. Take it easy. Take